Welcome to NFL Daily, where we're happy to give starting quarterback jobs to Joe Flacco in the year 2025. I'm Gregg Rosenthal, and I'm here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio talking to our friend of the show, JP Acosta from SB Nation, who is joining us to talk the top 10 most interesting offenses of the season. But first, a little bit of news. Great to have you back on the show, JP.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
You're a fan favorite, and by that I mean like I'm the fan. I'm your fan, and you've been awesome when we've had you on in the past. And yeah, we're gonna get to the most interesting offenses. We'll see how many we can fit in. Maybe it'll be less than 10. Maybe it'll be more. I don't like sticking to that number necessarily because first we got to talk a little bit of news. And yeah, I was looking at Pro Football Reference, JP, when the Browns made what was the obvious decision to name Joe Flacco the starting quarterback in 2025. And I was thinking, like, man, who was he playing with the first time he was in a starting quarterback competition? And he basically was just given that job as a rookie, but Troy Smith was on that team. Todd Bowman might have been the backup, or it might have been Troy Smith. I'm not sure. But he was throwing to Derek Mason, Todd Heap, and Mark Clayton. I mean, he has been in the NFL that long. That was his weapons. And his backfield, to me, was fascinating. It was Willis McGahee, Ray Rice as a rookie, and the leading rusher for that team that year in carries and yards was actually LaRon McClain, back when they were doing like a fullback running back thing. I think he made the Pro Bowl that year. And so that is how long Joe Flacco has been in the league. And now he's handing the ball off to Dylan Sampson, who was probably, about 3 years old when that was all happening.
It's fascinating how Joe Flacco has survived multiple eras of NFL offense. He has gone from the fullback I formation condensed form of the NFL. He has played in the spread and shred version of the NFL. And now as we sort of return to the 12 personnel gap scheme, power counter world, Joe Flacco is still around. I'm starting to believe that he is sort of the anchor being of the NFL universe. And you cannot have a thriving NFL season without Joe Flacco starting at least 3 games.
No, I remember that 2019 battle. He was in with the Broncos, and the namesake of the studio, Chris Wesseling, was pretty fired up about that Broncos team initially. Vic Fangio's Joe Flacco Broncos. It didn't stay on the tracks the whole time, but I love me some Flacco because he went from like overrated initially because he was a very good rookie for a rookie, won a couple playoff games, to a guy who didn't always seem like he loved ball that much. He didn't have that reputation. And then, maybe he wasn't the friendliest quarterback for Lamar Jackson to enter into a organization with. And then as it's gone on, I think he just realized he has that love. And look, he is obviously the best option for them for week 1. I think we'll see Dylan Gabriel and Shadur Sanders at some point during the regular season, probably in that order, but we'll see. And they're making the case right now publicly, JP, at least through Adam Schefter, that they're strongly considering keeping 4 quarterbacks, that they're like leaning towards that. To me, that speaks to like, please someone offer us something for Kenny Pickett. That's what my guess is.
I think that also leans towards Kenny Pickett being the guy that gets the axe here. But on the larger scale, it means we're just trying anything in 2025. We just want to see what works. If one of these guys pans out and they win a few games and looks good, cool. That'd be awesome. If none of them work out and they have the worst team in the NFL and they get number 1 pick, cool. We'll go draft a quarterback then. They are really going for the quarterbacks don't matter version of the NFL. We do not care who is under center for us, just as long as we reach our main goal of figuring out who everybody else is going to be on this team once we get to 2026 when we might actually need a quarterback.
That's fair. And, Stefanski talked about how important developing quarterbacks are. And I think they're going to play these 2 guys eventually. But I just wonder, like, why does this group have so much leash? I don't think they do. I think they need to win some games. Kevin Stefanski's proven to be a good offensive coach. He's won 2 Coach of the Year awards, which is crazy. But, looking for a year 6 from Andrew Berry at GM and Stefanski together seems odd to me. I was going to talk about it later, but since we're on Browns, they signed a player, Isaiah Bond, as an undrafted rookie and gave him a fully guaranteed rookie contract after sexual assault allegations were dismissed. And the one thing I'm just going to say on this is like the allegations are dismissed. And I'm not saying that this young man doesn't deserve to go look and have a professional career. But I am saying that Andrew Berry and the Browns are a team that has essentially decided to look for an advantage in the market, like get an edge. It's an analytically driven team by going after guys that have sexual assault allegations and seeing if they can get a talented player for cheap. And it obviously was a disaster for Deshaun Watson, but it's also not even the only other player on the roster, Isaiah Bond. So it's just like, why is that the thing that you want to be known for, Cleveland Browns? Let's move on to Matthew Stafford. He's back at practice. I actually was a little surprised. He's back at practice. He took 26 reps in full team drills. So not saying the panic is off, but I'm feeling better than I was last week.
My first thought when I saw that was the immortal chamber worked. Whatever they had him in,
immortal.
Whatever immortal chamber, hyperbolic time chamber, whatever they had him in cooking for the last 3 weeks, it worked, I guess. Like, we'll see what happens. But this is Stafford being healthy and at least enough for this team is going to really shake up both the short and long term for the Rams' future. Obviously, if he's healthy right now, the Rams are one of the favorites or one of the sneaky contenders to come out of the NFC. They have all the skill talent. They had the pass rush to make it really far in the playoffs. But long term, you also are set up with the Falcons 2026 draft pick. So if Matthew Stafford feels like this is the off ramp, if this is the final year and he's going to go out in the blaze of glory, you've kind of giving yourself that off ramp, like I said, to getting another quarterback in a year where right now it's looking like there are going to be a lot of quarterbacks available in the first round. So short term, long term, it feels like it's a great thing that Matthew Stafford is actually playing and actually healthy. So shout out to those guys with the immortal chamber because they might know something we don't.
That was the best branding and deal that they could have advertised and they could have possibly had, that he happened to be caught that day at practice, which probably was not on purpose, going into the chamber. But yeah, he announced last week that he is taking over as one of the hosts of the Let's Go podcast. A podcast that's like a radio show and used to have Bill Belichick and then it had Tom Brady. And I'm only mentioning that because it just seems like something a guy that's thinking about what's next would do. So is this the final year of Matthew Stafford? I have zero information, even heard zero speculation. I just think it's logical to think that that's quite possible based on the contract that he signed. But it's good to hear him back. And Sean McVay is not making any promises, saying that we're just taking it day to day. Wouldn't even say he's practicing tomorrow. They are going to ramp him up. But so far, so good. Good to hear. A couple other injury items for you. You can respond to whichever you find the most interesting of this 3-pack. So Jordan Love already back at practice on Monday. That was fast after the thumb surgery. Justin Jefferson will practice this week. So that's good to finally hear. And then unfortunately the Chiefs lost their first round pick from a few years ago, Felix Anadike Uzama, for the season with a hamstring injury. Just a guy who hasn't contributed much to their bottom line, did not get on the field much in the playoffs last year and is now out for the season. So whatever strikes your fancy out of that 3-pack, JP.
I think the thing I'm most fascinated by is Anadike Uzama going on to the season-ending IR, because the Chiefs have had a little bit of an underrated issue at getting pass rush outside of guys named Chris Jones. If they can generate pressure, and I think that's the reason why they drafted Anadike Uzama, because they've been constantly trying to find a guy to be a good complement to Chris Jones whenever teams double him, but they haven't been able to find that consistently. George Karlaftis is a great run defender, more of a hammer on the stunts and the games that Spags likes to play, but they don't have anybody outside of Chris Jones who can really get them a bucket on third downs. So Anadike Uzama was supposed to be that guy, was supposed to be another designated pass rusher. That light hasn't come on yet. And they've kind of scraped by with the margin signings. I think Charles Omenihu worked for a second there.
Still there. He's still there.
He is still there, thriving, surviving. Shout out to Charles Dominique for being the quintessential complimentary guy. He was the compliment to Nick Bosa back on the D'Amico Niners teams. So they need to find a consistent second guy with Chris Jones, and Felix Anudike-Uzomah going off season in the IR is tough because that's another high draft pick you sent down the drain and another pass rusher that you really lost for the season.
Yeah, the teams like the Chiefs who are trying to keep a dynasty going. We'll get to them in a little bit. Spoiler alert. You just can't miss much on these picks. Now you make the trade, when you get rid of Tyreek Hill and then you draft Karlaftis and McDuffie, and that's a home run. But when you miss on some of these picks like a Sky Moore or an Adike Uzama, it really hurts. And yeah, you think about that edge group. Karlaftis is a very good starting edge, but after that, it's Mike Dana and it's Charles Omenihu and it's a rookie 3rd-round pick, Ashton Gillette. So they hope that he steps up. And yeah, when I mentioned the Bond thing before too, it's like Isaiah Bond got double the amount of guaranteed money, for instance, than Ashton Gillette. And that's all. That, like, I understand he should get a job, but like, why do the Browns have to be the team that feel like they're the team trying to get an edge, seeking out these players? I just feel like they're telling on themselves. All right, enough of that. Xavier Howard is back in the league. He's with the Indianapolis Colts. That is not a shock because they are really thin at cornerback. So the former Dolphin gets a job there. DJ Chark, I mentioned a few days ago, not sure if he had a future with the Falcons. He got cut on Monday. And then just a couple injury items. I thought it was interesting that, Stephon Diggs said to Diana Rossini on The Athletic that, he wasn't sure if he was going to play week 1. A lot of questions about that in New England. And all they've stressed is that he is ahead of schedule, but it does remind me of a lot of guys coming off a torn ACL who are fully cleared and they practice a lot and things are looking great, but maybe they're not really all the way back. So just something to watch there as they wait for Christian Gonzalez and Kendrick Bourne, are 2 guys also out of practice. I want to get to these offenses. Enough preamble, JP. And I want you to start. And then I'll get to my Chiefs pick. And people are like, you picked the Chiefs as the most interesting offense. Just wait and listen. But first, I want to hear who you start with.
Well, people are probably going to be mad because my most interesting offenses come from the bottom of the league. The first one I'm starting with is the New York Jets. I am so fascinated by what the Jets can be in 2025 because they are sort of doing this thing where we're like, okay, we're just not even going to worry about throwing the ball. We're going to try and have the most athletic offensive line in the league. We're going to have 3 guys in the backfield who can really be a threat on the ground and in the ground game. One of my favorite, quirky, season predictions is the Jets lead the NFL in rushing attempts because I think they are well set up. Tanner Engstrand comes over from Detroit, where obviously running the ball is a high priority for them. And what we've seen in the preseason is that they are going to move people on the ground. With Olu Fashanu and Armand Mimbu playing well at both tackle spots, Elijah Vera Tucker is healthy. And now you have truly a 3-headed monster back there with Justin Fields, Braylon Allen, and Breece Hall. They're going to be so physical on the ground. And I think it's going to cause some problems for opposing defenses because of how they've the Jets are doing this at the perfect time in the NFL because NFL defenses are lighter, smaller box counts. They play the Bills twice a year, who seem to only want to survive in small box counts and playing nickel all the time, whereas the Jets just want to line up in 12 personnel. They want to run the ball at you. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how far they can go while trying to hide Justin Fields' deficiencies as a passer.
You are a sicko that you start there. I know that's your type of ball. By the way, they start with 2 home games: Steelers and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's spicy. It's amazing that that's not in prime time. That's a 1:00 game, and then they do have those Bills who getting try not to overreact to the preseason game, but I am a little concerned with their defense in general, just the defense on the Bills side. And so, in theory, that would be the matchup that the Jets want. Do you think and we're talking kind of offenses in general in this show, but the Jets specifically are a part of all these teams that are getting heavier. The fact that the whole league is doing it on some level, or that a lot of the league is doing it, do you think that's going to mitigate whatever advantage you get from that?
I think it might, but I also think with the way the Jets have built this team and who they have as their current starters, I mean, you can try and mitigate as the running the football as much you want against the Jets, but you have three legit guys back there who are going to punish you on the ground. I think Braylon Allen and Breece Hall are a really nice complement to each other, and then Justin Fields is one of the most dynamic run threats at the position in the NFL. But I think with where defenses are going, with seeing how offenses have gotten heavier, they're trying to get bigger as well. I think the Jets are kind of catching it at the right time because they also have just this incredibly athletic offensive line. I think the Jets offensive line, it shows in drafting a bunch of first round picks along that offensive line, Fashanu, Elijah Vera Tucker, Armand Bembu. You have a whole bunch of really athletic guys up front who want to go and hit people really hard. Kyle Long told me on CBS it's easy for young guys to buy into the run game because you're using your athleticism. Older guys, you can tell them to sit back and pass protect a lot. Run blocking is a little like, okay, I don't want to run my head into this wall 40 times a game. But the Jets being able and willing to lean into that physicality in the run game while they try and figure out whatever they're going to do as a passing offense, because I'm not super excited about what I've seen from Justin Fields in the passing game in the preseason. Of course, it is preseason, so I'm hedging with that, but I think this team is going to be very, very run oriented.
I want different flavors. I'm totally with you. Like, I want different types of teams. I don't want every team to look the same. The fact that their second receiver is either Mason Taylor, a second round tight end, or Josh Reynolds, who would be like a 4 or a 5 on most teams. Like, it's going to be tough to throw the ball. And you mentioned the athleticism up front. Membu is a guy to watch this year. The oldest guy on that offensive line is probably John Simpson, who's like 28 years old. And man, he is a road grader. If you want to see some like highlight level, like run blocking, tape, John Simpson's a great guy to do that, 330 pounds. So I'm with you. They're turning it back to like 1984. I love it. Unfortunately, the Chiefs have looked like a 1980s, 90s offense too much lately. So I'm going with them as my most interesting. So I try to do a little self-scouting here, JP, on the show. And we have a daily show. We talk about everyone all the time. And I was actually thinking like, well, who haven't I talked about that much? And, we hit on like the Chiefs offensive line and Josh Simmons and that whole thing a lot, but I feel like we haven't actually talked that much about the Chiefs offense and team as a whole. There is Chiefs fatigue with me, with everyone. And let's be real. They are doing something in a way that basically no team other than the Patriots have ever done in the history of the NFL. Playing this high level of consistent football deep into January, it's never been done like this. And they've had a good offense still, JP, the last few years, like a top 10 offense, but it's been more, 6 to 10. If you look at their DVOA, they've been around 8th. And Mahomes was really under pressure a lot. They were 3rd in point differential, JP, in their own division a year ago. They had a ton of 3 and outs, but when they actually moved the ball, then they held on to the ball forever. So it was not an entertaining, offense to watch. And I think about where Mahomes is in his career, and there is something to me about getting embarrassed in the Super Bowl that I think there's a human nature of the way that they want to respond, the way he wants to respond. And he has been a different quarterback, JP, in terms of not having the highlight type of plays, the big time throws if PFF is charting it. And I do think he has a better chance to make those type of throws this year with a little bit of help from his wide receivers if they're healthy. Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, and Xavier Worthy played exactly 0 snaps together last year. And we'll see when Rashee Rice is suspended. If he is suspended, I expect it's going to happen. But if you get those 3 guys on the field at the same time, I do think it is the most explosive and the best receiver group they've had since Tyreek Hill left. What do you expect out of this offense this year, and how do you think they'll evolve?
I expect them to be a little bit more complementary to each other, especially in this receiving room. If we're including Travis Kelce, last year, the offense felt so constrained where you didn't have anybody downfield you could trust. You didn't have anybody outside of Travis Kelce in the intermediate game that you can trust. And the offense sort of turned to death by a trillion paper cuts, which of course, like you said, they were still a top 10 offense by DVOA. They were a top 10 offense in success rate, but success rate is how often you move the chains. And that's where the Chiefs asked Patrick Mahomes to be Superman was on third downs. I think his third down conversion rate, especially as a scrambler, was near the 70s as a in the NFL last year. So if you continue to ask Patrick Mahomes to be Superman all the time, he can do that because it's Patrick Mahomes. But as we saw in the Super Bowl, if teams don't respect your offensive line or your receiving core, it's really easy to just go, okay, we're just going to play man, and you're not going to be able to beat us. So now with Rashee Rice back, whenever he gets back, you have a whole lot more compliments, especially downfield. I think having Xavier Worthy in another year where he's not exactly going to be the number one receiving option is going to really help him in his development and just sort of the finer details of route running, some of the details of playing the position. I think getting Rashee Rice back is going to be huge for this offense, just in the in-between game. I think Rashee Rice is such a good in-between receiver with his physicality, with the ability to create after the catch. That's going to be something that really helps in this offense if they do continue down this road of being this horizontal spread and shred offense where we're going to kill you with mesh and bubble screens, and we're going to throw these quick
let's go down the field a little more, JP. We got to bring the Mahomes back, bring the excitement back. We can do that with Worthy a little bit. I know he's a little better. If Hollywood Brown can ever stay healthy, he's supposed to be back this week, by the way. What about Tyquan Thornton is making this team? We got a little bit of speed here.
You have the speed, but I think that what the Chiefs have sort of lacked in this downfield, it's sort of tilted in a way to now where it was you didn't have anybody downfield you could trust, to last year offensive line was really injured, going through a lot of issues up front. It's really hard to throw the ball downfield if you don't have enough time for your receivers to get downfield. I think this is going to be a really talented offensive line. I love what I've seen from Josh Simmons so far. Kingsley Suamataia has been up and down, especially as a pass protector, and that's going to be a big risk at left guard. But if you have Andy Heck as your offensive line coach, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and then playing next to Creed Humphrey, that should help be a little bit of a floor raiser. So I'm expecting a little bit more downfield, but I also think that this is sort of what the Chiefs have evolved into. This is the
you got to keep changing though, and if we're gonna compare them to the Patriots, and I think it's a good comparison just in that they're trying to do something that almost has never been done, staying at that level that long. You always have to evolve, and I just think Andy Reid's got another move in him. I don't know what it's gonna be. I just think they're gonna be different. You can't keep existing this way. And yeah, a great start is just decreasing that under pressure number. I know Mahomes holds on to the ball and everything, but his pressure numbers last year were way higher than they had ever been before. And so if I truly believe that Mahomes is, right at the top of the all-time greats, I just think this is, if you're looking at the career arc, is a season where we get a little more sizzle. That's what I'm expecting. And We'll see if it actually happens. Give me another offense that you're interested in.
I'm staying in the AFC East. I'm going to go with the Miami Dolphins. And I have been fascinated with the Dolphins offense since Mike McDaniel took over. And it's for different reasons that it was when he first took over the Dolphins. They were so explosive when he first got there. He was revolutionizing the NFL with the cheat motion, with all the cool stuff he was doing with Tyreek Hill. And then everybody realized that they can't block anybody in short yardage. They are one of the worst short yardage football teams I've ever seen. And I think some of it was early due to Mike McDaniel's inability to develop and inability to change. But now I think it's about the personnel that you have. And I think the Dolphins have also realized that. They've gotten a little bit more athletic up front, drafting Jonas Savaianai to play left guard. You kind of change the offensive line configurations. You add Ollie Gordon on day 3, who's probably going to be your short yardage, I hate to call him this because it's not exactly a great player, but he is what Jeff Wilson was supposed to be when you brought Jeff Wilson over from San Francisco. So I think what I want to see from this Dolphins offense, I think the passing game is going to be fine, especially if you get Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle playing together healthy. But you need some more oomph from the blocking, especially with your tight ends, especially with the receivers, because they play so much 11 and 21 personnel. That requires a lot from your receivers blocking. I think Nick Westbrook-Akine was one of my favorite value signings of free agency because he is such a good blocker and does some of the dirty work over the middle of the field that the Dolphins have really lacked. The Dolphins offense has lacked an edge. Even when Mike McDaniel was revolutionizing the NFL when he first got there, they have lacked an edge for such a long time. So I'm hoping this year, I just hope they get a little bit better on in those short yardage, those goal to go situations, just show a little bit more edge and physicality.
Yeah, Aaron Brewer's been coming off of an injury, but I believe he's been back on the field. Their center, on paper, the offensive line looks pretty good. I know Dolphins fans are very sensitive right now about everyone in the national media just picking on them and them seeming like, it could all go very wrong. There is absolutely a world where this offense goes very right. Tyreek Hill in a contract year, I think that could be a factor for him. I could see him having like one great last year. Jalen Waddle, all reports have been really positive with him and healthy, and the two of them are as dynamic and fast as it gets. Darren Waller, I'm not expecting a lot, but they're hoping he's returning to practice at some point this week, but it's something you can count on. And like you said, a more athletic, young offensive line with Achane really leading the way in the backfield. Like when he has the time, Tua at this point should have a master's level degree in this offense. And we've seen the difference between him being on the field and the rest. There is absolutely a world where, they make everyone look stupid by putting up a lot of points. But I do think you kind of need not a second move, JP, but you just need to evolve as a head coach. And I think Mike McDaniel, especially in the running game, needs to show that he can evolve. One coach I think did do a good job evolving, JP. Cliff Kingsbury last year. It was a little different. Were you surprised? I'm going to go Commanders as my next one. Were you surprised how they kept it rolling, even getting better towards the end?
I was definitely surprised. I have been a Cliff Kingsbury hater ever since he was at Texas Tech. He shut me up last year. I was actually really impressed with the way that he was able to keep that offense rolling, kind of develop and change the offense and sort of grow with his young quarterback. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned from watching the NFL last year. You can grow with your young quarterback. You don't have to throw every master's level QB stuff at him right now when he first gets into the NFL. Just throw the easy stuff at him. And as he grows, as he gets game time, you can start to add more stuff into the offense. But now it feels like the Commanders are firmly entrenched in being one of the better teams in the NFL offensively.
Well, this is why I find them interesting. Are they? I mean, it was 1 year. And so what are you going to do basically for number two?
Yeah, that's also been sort of my question with the Commanders offense is how will you throw a counterpunch this year? Because Jaden Daniels was really good last year and really, really efficient without turning the ball over. And I think that there's probably going to be some turnover regression. That's probably going to happen. It happens in the NFL, but I think what's really going to help them, of course, outside of Terry McLaurin being back on this team, is if you get a healthy Deebo Samuel to do all the RPO stuff, because that's really where this offense is built. It is built on the RPO game, kind of spreading everybody out and being able to use Jaden Daniels' legs as a threat in that area. It really has to be Deebo Samuel that can be the guy that he's always been before 2023, 2024.
Right. And he's kind of come and gone really since 2019, and it's gone up, it's gone down. He's had moments. I just wonder, how does their profile change this year? They were really unique in what they did last year. Cliff Kingsbury always plays at a really fast pace, and these numbers are from the FTN Almanac. The Football Outsiders, by Aaron Schatz. They went no huddle more than 62% of the time. The next closest team was 28%. It was a team that was not great throwing over the middle. That was a little bit of a knock on Jaden Daniels when you were comparing him to Drake May, let's say, coming out of college. Not great over the middle. Well, they didn't really throw over the middle much. It was all to the outside. And teams, when they went against them, for such a good running team, they played single high a ton. And you do wonder if teams will adjust to Jaden Daniels as a scrambler, because his scrambling, JP, it wasn't really the run game, like working him as part of the run game. A lot of it was just the scrambles. His scramble yards and first downs and everything was so far above any other quarterback. And so teams were playing them with the single high. They weren't trying to prevent like the big play, and they took advantage of it a lot of times with Jaden Daniels scrambling. So they did not throw the ball deep very much. When you think of Jaden Daniels, he's such a great deep throw, but they really didn't. That wasn't what they did well. And so there's just a interesting concoction of like strengths and weaknesses, and maybe it can all work again, and maybe they've got a good 2.0 plan. I think Jaden Daniels has shown he's ready to handle just about anything, but I'm just curious what you think it might look like this year versus what it looked like last year.
I'm also curious in what this offensive line is going to look like, especially with Laremy Tunsil, who has the pedigree of being one of the top 10 tackles in the NFL, but last year was brutal by any standards, but especially his standards, especially from the pre-snap penalty perspective. A whole lot of false starts, illegal formations. He was penalized a lot last year, and maybe that's going to change with being in a new environment. You draft Josh Connerly to play right tackle. You move, Brandon Coleman to left guard. You bring back Sam Cosmi from injury. I'm very curious on how this offensive line grows, because if you're going to spread teams out so much and you're going to play all the RPO stuff, that you're not bringing any extra blockers in the run game. It is really 5-on-5 in the run game, and that's why Jaden Daniels as a scrambler, that's why Jaden Daniels as a run threat matters so much, because you're easing some of the stress on the offensive line. So I wonder how they're going to be able to keep the run game efficient, especially in the running back runs area where they just weren't that good in true running back runs. Maybe Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt
Let's go.
The savior. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe
Bill gets a mention on the show. I love it.
Shout out to Bill. I'm curious by Bill Krosky-Merritt. I think he can be really fun in the offense. If they can generate some more success with their running back runs, maybe that'll help alleviate some of the stress on Daniels as a runner and help kind of open up more lanes for the offense.
Yeah, they're just such a unique team, because you add Tunsil, and it sounds like Sam Cosmi, their all-pro guard, will be back, they hope, this season earlier than you would expect, considering how serious his knee injury was. And yes, you did draft Josh Connerly to play right tackle for this team, but it's an older team. You add Debo. Noah Brown is probably your second best true wide receiver. So without Terry McLaurin back on the field, he's like your number one almost in terms of running like the traditional stuff. Brian Robinson, as we're taping this, it's Monday afternoon. They're going to actually play a preseason game tonight. Brian Robinson's not in that game, and people are like, are they, there's some buzz that they might be looking to trade him. Zach Ertz is still really involved here. It's a very old team mixed with Jaden. I find them very interesting. You could tell me they're top 5. You could tell me they take a big step back. I would not be shocked either way. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with more of the most interesting offenses in a little bit. One of the reasons I wanted to have JP Acosta on the show, I just wanted to hear him talk a little Jags ball. I'm very interested in the Jags. If he wasn't going to talk Jags from his part of the country, I was going to talk Jags. But to me, you're more of like the Jags expert here. I know you've got it all set up for me.
Oh yeah, I have spent so many weeks and months leading up to the season emotionally hedging for the possibility that the Jaguars are just not good, which for my entire life, they have not been good. But I actually think this offense is going to be really fun and it's going to be a legitimately good offense. If I'm using what they've done in the preseason as sort of the barrier for what barometer for what Liam Cohen's going to bring to this offense, it is so much more precise and there's so much more detail within the offense. There's an idea of what's going on. I think last year there was a whole lot of what are we trying to do? There's no straightforward vision of what's being done. So now with Liam Cohen running the offense, there's a straightforward vision, there's an idea, there's a whole lot more yards after the catch opportunity. I think this skill position group is going to be really
It's fun.
It's really fun, led by Brian Thomas Jr., who I think is fantastic, going to have another great year this upcoming year. Travis Hunter is obviously super fun every time he touches the ball, and you can tell when he touches the ball, he is looking to make a big play. And it's evident every time he gets it after the catch. Brenton Strange has actually really impressed me during this preseason. I was never of the belief that Liam Cohen used his tight ends very much in Tampa. And I think that's probably because of how Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and the running backs were used. But Brenton Strange is super athletic. He's made a lot of plays in the receiving game, especially underneath. And now the offense has layers to where De'Ami Brown is the vertical explosive guy. You have Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter as sort of your in-between, doing most of the stuff after the catch. You have Brenton Strange as your underneath. And then you also have this running back room, which is really talented, not even include guys like Bishal Tootin, who shows that he has the juice when he runs. There's just a different feel when he has the ball in his hands. He sort of like bounces around when he runs the ball, and I think it's super cool. So I'm really intrigued by how all of this mixes together. I think Trevor Lawrence has played really well this preseason. Outside of just one hospital ball to Brian Thomas Jr. against the Steelers, he has been incredibly efficient, razor sharp. I think the footwork has been much cleaner. So I'm in on this Jags offense. And I know it's sort of easy to say as someone who's a Jaguars fan, but as someone who has been emotionally hedging against this team, possibly be to make sure this team isn't bad, I think this offense is going to be really good.
Yeah, I am optimistic. Maybe not as much as Liam Cohen on day one. And there's a lot of ideas here, right? You know, you have a lot of ideas in the front office with James Gladwell. You have Liam Cohen, obviously. You have Grant Udinski, like one of, if not the youngest offensive coordinators in the league, who comes from Minnesota, who's younger than half the players here. I do love that, you know, when you first signed De'Ami Brown, I'm like, man, is that a lot for De'Ami Brown? And now you kind of think about it, it's like, no, he's a role player. Role players now make a $10 million 1-year contract. That's actually like your fourth option in the receiving game. That, as you say, is adding layers. And the thing I've liked out of Trevor Lawrence is he just seems to be thinking a little quicker. We got to see it when it's a real game and you're facing real defenses, obviously. But I love hearing that you think the footwork is cleaner and there's just a lot going on. Now, I will push back on, they haven't been bad all your life. I talked to Dante Fowler last week. Now, the offense wasn't amazing, but Blake Bortles was pretty efficient in 2017. So you had 1 year that you could enjoy.
I very much remember the Tommy Bohannon fullback up the middle touchdown against the Steelers. I was able to brag to all my friends that the Jaguars finally went in and did something really cool. I was a super big fan. I'm a super big fan of that team just in the way they played. But I think that is one of the 3 seasons that they were good.
It's been pretty rough.
It's been rough. But this offense is I think they're going to be really cool to watch day in, day out. The screen game has been really fun, whether it's been the slip screens to Bigsby or ETN. There's been a lot of quick game to Travis Hunter. And I think that emphasis on yards after the catch is so much different from what Doug Pearson and Press Taylor were trying to do last year, which is we're not going to make this easy at all. We are throwing the ball 50 yards downfield, which I think Trevor Lawrence can do, but you want to give your offense easy buttons. And I think this offense, of course, in limited time in the preseason, but the premise has been to give your quarterback easy buttons and options, especially if the first read isn't open. And I think that's why Trevor Lawrence has looked so much crisper, so much cleaner, is because he has those easy yak buttons to press.
And they're in the AFC South. I think it matters because I think the Colts and the Titans have a chance to be two of the worst teams in the AFC. I think they have a chance. And I think that matters. You get 4 games against them in general. The schedule is forgiving. The Texans are dangerous. I don't think they're the Ravens or the Chiefs or the Bills going into this season. They're dangerous, but I think that's an advantage. And yeah, I think they're just going to make more sense in general. I'm going to go with the Lions. And again, I'm picking a lot of the better teams in the league from a year ago because I actually don't think we've talked about them enough. I mean, they were averaging 33 points a game last season. It's just absolutely preposterous. And you've got 8 starters back, or 8 starters rather, that are from these recent Lions draft classes, like this regime. That's amazing. And the 3 that aren't are Jared Goff, who you obviously feel very good about in terms of how he fits in this scheme and with the talent around him. Like he's not a top 5 quarterback, and there have been moments, including in that Washington game a year ago, where he made some big mistakes, and that worries you. But the fact that you have this combination, when I mentioned the 8 starters, and I'm counting Isaac Tesla as a starter already, as like a 3rd receiver. That's my projection for like week 15, because otherwise you're counting Tim Patrick as a starter. And I think Isaac Tesla in the end will have a bigger role. The only older guys on this entire roster are the offensive linemen, Graham Glasgow and Taylor Decker on the offense. And I just think people are like, if the window's closing, or this, or have they missed their opportunity? They are the envy of every team in the league. If you could ask for one thing, it would be to have continuity and youth and talent all at the exact same time. With the way that the collective bargaining agreement is set up, JP, it's almost impossible to do that and keep it for long. And the Lions have it right now. I think they are ready to show that it's not all about Ben Johnson. Dan Campbell is definitely striking that, drum beat like throughout the preseason, that he is ready. It's a prove it season for Dan Campbell. And there's really every reason to believe, because of that youth and their continuity, that they can do it again this year.
I actually think Dan Campbell doesn't get enough credit for what he's done, especially with that offense. I think he had more of a say in the operations of that offense and people gave him credit for. And that's because, you don't associate Dan Campbell with being offensive mastermind. But when you think about what the offense wanted to be and what the offense wants to do, I think Dan Campbell has to get some credit there outside of Ben Johnson. But when you look at what this offense is and what they are from a roster and talent acquisition standpoint, this year, like you said, is sort of setting up to be a Brad Holmes flex year. Like this is why I get paid the way I do. This is why everybody thinks I am one of the best GMs in the league, because of the way that he can draft and the way the Lions draft and develop to get guys in the starting spots. I think Christian Mahogany played well in his spare time, and now he's going to be a starter. Tate Ratledge is moving over to guard, is going to be really, I thought they tried him at center, which I was like, that's weird. And then they're like, never mind, we'll move him back to guard where he naturally played at Georgia. So I'm really intrigued by how they can sort of mitigate having 2 first-year starters along that offensive line. And I think that goes back to Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff being the guy now where he has had a complete and total mastery of this offense, to where I think he's going to be the one setting the protections, making the checks, and getting everything aligned up there. Whereas I think he and Frank Ragnow sort of shared that. With Ragnow gone, I think that's mostly going to be on Jared Goff's shoulders. But this offense is still incredibly talented and incredible, and has the ability to put up so many points on so many teams. They are going to be dynamic. You mentioned Isaac Tesla. I was initially like, oh, that's weird. They drafted him in the 3rd round. But if you're big, tall, and fast and don't drop anything, that's gonna lead you to some success in the NFL. You don't have to be a superstar, but if you're big, tall, fast, and can catch, you're gonna play. And I think Tesla is gonna play a lot. You saw the box out touchdown against the Dolphins. I think that's gonna be his sort of area and where he wins this year. But this Lions team is still going to be really good.
Yeah, the overall idea of the draft picks that I brought up is just think how many guys could be peaking. Now Isaac Tesla, he's a rookie, he's not going to be peaking. Jameson Williams, ready to do that thing. Like, he has steadily gotten better and better. Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, squarely at the top of his prime. Penei Sewell, squarely at the top of his prime. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think the running back timeline is different. To me, he's hitting the top of his prime. He could be an offensive player of the year type of candidate. Sam Laporta entering year 3. It's guys that are getting better, ideally, all at the same time. So I'm really excited to watch them, and we'll see. Like, you don't need to evolve it that much, but I think they'll be looking to evolve it, somewhat. The average depth of target for Goff was just so low last year. The play action is always going to be high. You'll see if he can do a little more on the sidelines. They barely throw to the sidelines last year, but I'm excited. All right, we got to pick up the pace slightly if we want to get through all our teams. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will. Give me another offense.
So speaking of evolution, I am going with what I call the unction in the NFL. I love the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that this offense is going to rock. And I think that it's going to rock because they have built through the draft and sort of found this identity of we're going to be really tough to tackle. No matter what happens, like, you're going to have a really hard time tackling. I think adding Ashton Jonty obviously is one of the biggest feathers in the cap in that area, and he's going to affect the passing game, the run game. You've already seen the Raiders try and get him involved in the screen game and underneath. I think the way that they have sort of built the layering in that offense, Dante Thornton becoming the starting third receiver, is huge because he is going to occupy that vertical plane of explosiveness. He really didn't do anything else outside of that at Tennessee. He was asked to run posts and goes. And when you, like I said, when you are big, tall, and fast, that works in the NFL. You can find a role there. But I think you're opening up so much of that area for a guy like Brock Bowers, who now that he is bald, I think we need a new nickname for him. I'm going with Stone Cold Brock Bowers.
Ooh, okay.
We gotta go Stone Cold for Brock Bowers. I think Jack Bech, when he starts coming along, is going to occupy that intermediate area. Jacoby Myers is also going to be really tough to tackle. But this team has an identity on offense, and you're led by a quarterback in Geno Smith.
What's the identity?
The identity is yards after the catch, physical, and tough to tackle. I think that's going to be their MO. If you look at sort of what Chip Kelly did at Ohio State this past year, of course, the collection of talent was drastically different compared to, the Raiders collection of talent compared to the NFL versus Ohio State's compared to the rest of college football. But their idea was, we are going to be physical. We're going to try and beat you up. And then we have guys who are incredibly tough to tackle. So I think having all this collection of talent that's going to really occupy this middle of the field, the underneath area, and we're going to try and make it really hard for you to tackle us through 60 minutes, and then ask your quarterback to make some of those high-level deep throws that Geno Smith has shown he can make. I think this offense is going to be like really good, and they're probably going to have to be because the defense isn't going to be that good.
Right.
But I'm excited to see what this offense does.
I am too. We've been talking up the Raiders, and they're just one of those teams that are fascinating to watch this year. And I love having Chip Kelly back in our lives. I think from a fantasy football perspective, the fact that their defense is going to be so bad, in my mind, is only going to help this team out. I do fear, as a Geno guy, it's going to be a lot of like fourth quarters where they're down by 10 and he's just slinging it, and there's going to be a lot of interceptions, and there's going to be a lot of big plays. I don't know, though. You're really counting on the scheme to help out this offensive line. I think on paper it's a pretty average group in terms of talent, and help out at least the perimeter receivers that'll be along with Geno Smith. But you're absolutely right that over the middle of the field, they should be nails. I'm going to go with the Bengals as my next team. And the reason I want to put them as interesting is, can they be like the Colts under Peyton Manning a little bit? Maybe even the Bills in the 90s. And why I point out those two teams are like, they kind of just did what they did every year, right? They didn't really evolve, but they were just awesome. The Colts kind of just did what they did. They were extremely talented. They had the right quarterback leading the way. Same thing with the Bills. They had a very specific way of attacking defenses that that no one looks like now. Manning is more of a comp to Joe Burrow, point and shoot, and I just wonder, because is this an offense that is going to change much? Do they need to change to stay at the level they're at? I'm worried about their offensive line in general, but maybe I shouldn't be. Like when you look at what they do from a schematic perspective and kind of how they approach playing football, do you think they need to be any different, or can they just be the same group that they always are, and kind of the same type of attack with just Joe Burrow, in that shotgun and spread out and making decisions? Because when they try to go under center, JP, it never works out very well. The numbers are terrible. They're as pass happy as any team in the league, and it has worked. So can they be one of those teams that we remember like in 2 decades that is that consistently good every year doing the same thing over and over?
So I do think they need a little bit of evolution from their offense, and it's not in any way towards the passing game. It is, like you said, it is that, I guess you'd call it the siloing of their under center versus shotgun, where if they're under center, they're running it. If they're in shotgun, they're passing it. I think involving a little bit more gun run is going to help this team. If you're in the shotgun and can run the ball effectively, one, it's really hard to do in the NFL or at any level of football to be in shotgun so exclusively and run the ball well unless you have a running threat at quarterback or the best offensive line in football. So I'm curious on how they're going to do that. If they can just add a little bit more variety to their run game at a shotgun, it's going to really help them out. But really, as a passing team, you don't really need to do much. Like you said, there's not much evolution that has to come from this group when you have the most dominant quarterback receiver threat in the NFL right now. I think another thing that's going to really help this team is keeping Amarius Mims healthy, right tackle. I think that he is such a talented player, but he just can't stay healthy. He can never stay on the field. And that's an issue for an offensive line that is already sort of operating by bits and bobs. We're going to try and bring in Dalton Risner for a visit here. We're going to try and put Cody Ford here. We're going to try Cordovosin there. Like there's so much of we're going to try and just get by on the offensive line because Joe Burrow is such a good sack avoider, and you already have two of the best receivers in the league. But I think they can evolve by just making Joe Burrow's life a little easier.
I totally agree, and yet it feels like we're a little bit back in the 2021 season where, to me, there are, the tackle position's better overall, but there are major questions because if Mims misses any time, it is a cliff to the third tackle. They're trying to figure out who that would be. And it's probably Cody Ford, who had been playing guard, and I listened to the local coverage there, and they think it's already almost a 5-alarm fire in terms of the injuries, of the depth that they have in the interior of their offensive line. And I saw those Brady comments. It's like he does come off a little bit as an angry old man talking about the quarterback position. And when he was talking about that, he doesn't want to be a quarterback that's, you got to be a quarterback that's hands-on, that you're making these changes. You're meeting with the coaches. You're saying what plays that you want. You're yelling at people. And I was like, who is he talking to? If you want to, and to me, I was like, did he just watch quarterback? And is he talking to Joe Burrow? Because Joe Burrow is very different. Joe Burrow is like, I'm not going to be the guy that's going to tell the guys that's do it wrong, that they would need to do it wrong, and the job's hard enough. And I don't think if he was talking to Joe Burrow that's right to do so, but I do get the feeling that Joe Burrow is a little more hands off, and yet they make sure to build the offense like around his strengths. No one ever talks about like what Zach Taylor does from a schematic perspective, but I don't get the sense that it's Burrow like dictating everything. I think it's them trying to play to his strengths. And you mentioned the running game. Like, I'm huge on Chase Brown. Spoiler alert, where we've got a fantasy mock draft later this week coming up. I love me some Chase Brown. A lot of that is because of the receiving game, but I'm going to give you some stats before we go to our next offense that is the most interesting of the season. The Bengals versus expected in terms of passes and runs led the league in passing versus expected, JP, on second and long, in power situations, while ahead, while behind. Like, that is everything. Every single thing that there is, basically. Like, well ahead and well behind, you lead the league in passing versus expected. The only stat that I could find, and this is all from the FTN Almanac, that they weren't first, was on first downs. They were actually, second in terms of passing over expected. So they are as pass heavy as you can possibly be. Let's do a speed round to wrap it up. I'll give a quick one first. Seahawks. It's not just because of the preseason. It's partly because our producer, Chris Pavona, wanted me to give a little love to them. But they've got some talent on the offensive line between Gray Zabel and Charles Cross and Abe Lucas. Look, it's going to be 2 wide receivers on the field. Clint Kubiak led the league in that last year with the Saints, and it's going to be, Kupp and JSN on the field together. Do they fit together? I don't know. Is Ken Walker a scheme fit? I don't quite know, but to me, they're going to be really fascinating whether they can make this offense work around Sam Darnold and whether he can build just career arc-wise off what he did a year ago.
The Seahawks are bringing sexy back. They're bringing the fullback back to the NFL. This is the game that I am here for. Robbie Oots has been one of my favorite rookies to watch because you can tell when he comes into the game. I hope the Seahawks fans really kind of play up to the Robbie Oots name, kind of like the Packers did with John Kuhn, because I think that'd be incredible. But you can tell that the offensive line really meshes a lot better with this offensive scheme, with this system. The movement skills of Anthony Bradford, Gray Zabel has been really good. I think Jalen Sindell is pushing Oluwatimi for the center spot, and that's because they can move really well on those wide zone runs, and that's really where Sam Darnold is effective. You want to mitigate the amount of time Sam Darnold has to be you want to mitigate the amount of times that Darnold has to take the reins of the offense and move the ball by himself. And I think you do that through a successful and efficient run game. And everything that I've seen this preseason has been leading up to that point of them becoming a really effective team on the ground.
All right, give me your last one. One you got to get in.
I have unfortunately fallen for the Jerry Jones propaganda train. I'm going with the Dallas Cowboys. I am so fascinated by what they can be, and it's partially because of who they brought in as offensive coordinator. Clayton Adams, the former offensive line coach at Arizona. I am all for offensive line coaches being promoted to offensive coordinator. They are going to do a whole lot more 12 personnel, 13 gap scheme. That is what Arizona did, but I think that's going to help in Dak Prescott not having to do everything in the offense. I've talked so much about widening the margin for error for your quarterback. And I think Dak's margin for error was so small in that offense because they had no running game. They had no commitment to the run game. They had one receiver. And now you have complements like a run game that should, on the offensive line should be good enough. I know Tyler Guyton's going to miss some time, but when Guyton is back, that run game, that offensive line should be fun. I'm worried about what they're going to do at running back. But the receiving group, if George Pickens has his head on straight, that is an incredibly complimentary group. When you think of George Pickens' fit in this offense, you're thinking of the best years of Michael Gallup, where you throw the ball to him on the sideline, every 50-50 ball becomes 70-30. I think that's something that the offense has really missed, but I'm excited to see what this offense does, and I'm intrigued to see what they do in 2025.
Yeah, they're one of the teams in week 1 that I'm most curious because what is the Clayton Adams effect going to be? Is it going to be more Schottenheimer? What is the Brian Schottenheimer offense in 2025? I don't really know, and that's why I think they totally fit on this list. And who knows, maybe one of those Jaguars running backs, Bigsby or Etienne, maybe they shake loose before the beginning of the season, and the Cowboys would be a logical landing spot for them. JP, you did a fantastic job. Appreciate you, and check out JP's work at SB Nation. We'll get you on again soon.
Of course.
We will be back in the studio next for QB Island, but that's not the next show that you're going to hear in the feed. 40s and free agents with me and Daniel Jeremiah talking about all the pickups in the offseason. That's next. Then QB Island, me, Jordan Rodriguez, Steve Weish. By the way, I owe you Atlanta Falcons and your fans. Later this week, I'm going to talk about you and your offense because you are fascinating. Football's back.